In their 100 years, Walt Disney Animation Studios has given us beloved films like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Pinocchio, The Lion King, and Frozen. There's been virtually a new film from them every year, but traditionally, it's limited to only one release annually. 2019 had Frozen 2, 2022 had Strange World, 2023 has Wish, you got the gist. However, every now and then, Disney Animation decides to release not one, but two films in 1 year. Usually when this happens, there wasn't a release during the previous year, like when 2015 didn't have a release, but 2016 gave us Zootopia and Moana. And it made me ask the question, of every year Disney Animation released two films in 1 year, which film was the better one? Before we start though, I should mention that I won't be including the years when the Fantasia films came out, because I just don't know how to compare something like Tarzan to something like Fantasia 2000. These films are great, but their structure makes them incredibly unique in the Disney Animation library. So, with the Fantasia titles out of the way, our list begins with the year 1977. From 1974 to 1976, not a single new Disney Animation title was released, so 1977 having two films feels more than justified. But while I like both The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh and The Rescuers, it's incredibly obvious to me which one is the better film. The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh is an absolute Disney classic. There's a reason why the Disney versions of these characters have become so iconic. And that's because Disney makes spending time with them such a warm, cozy, and endearing time. Well, Gopher hasn't become iconic, but he wasn't in the book, so he doesn't count.
I'm not in the book, but I'm at your service.
The Rescuers isn't without its charms, of course, and I like the characters just fine, but it's mostly a forgettable time. It's your standard Adventure of the Day story, the kind that's fun but doesn't leave that much of an impact. It's the type of film you watch as a kid on a lazy Sunday afternoon, but don't really think about again. It doesn't help either that the film sequel, The Rescuers Down Under, is so much better. Seriously, every time The Rescuers is brought up, I immediately want to bring up The Rescuers Down Under and talk about that one instead. It's such a fun sequel that gets so creative with the way the world works, and it's pretty much just a stronger version of the original Rescuers. You know your movie is bad when people want to talk about the sequel right away. Winnie the Pooh, on the other hand, has the opposite situation. I like many of its follow-ups, especially the 2011 one, but the original still remains an untouchable classic. The songs are fantastic, the characters are insanely likable, and the storybook framing makes for some wonderfully charming fourth wall breaks.
It's sailing clean out of the book! Quick, turn the page!
Oh, and how could we forget the film's ending?
When I'm away just doing nothing, will you come up here sometimes?
You mean alone? Just me?
Yes. And Pooh? Promise you won't forget me? Ever?
Oh, I won't, Christopher. I promise.
This ending always gets to me. It's like listening to the end of Puff the Magic Dragon. Being reminded that childhood ends and kids grow up and eventually say goodbye to certain things and experiences will always tug at my nostalgic heartstrings. It's an appropriately bittersweet ending to a film that celebrates the joy and wonder of being a little child, and will probably still get to me even when I'm 100.
Promise you won't forget me? Not even when I'm 100?
How old shall I be then?
99. Silly old bear.
I'm sorry, I just need a moment. The Emperor's New Groove is one of the funniest films I've seen in my life. Dinosaur is one of the most boring films I've seen in my life. It's actually impressive how polar of opposites my opinions are for both these films. Growing up, The Emperor's New Groove was one of those movies I put on over and over again because it made me laugh so hard. I distinctly remember lying on the living room carpet, clutching my stomach because I was laughing so hard at this scene.
Push against my back, and we'll walk up the hill. Ready? Go!
Ow! You did that on purpose. Ah!
No, I didn't. Right foot right. Left. Right. Left. Right.
Oh god. This film's humor is just so delightfully high energy and absurd, and the fast-paced animation greatly complements all the zany, cartoony antics. It's just straight up fun, especially when the villains are on screen. Yzma and Kronk are two of the best Disney villains ever. They're hilarious and over the top, and every scene with them is a riot.
Pull the lever, Kronk.
Now, The Emperor's New Groove is far from Disney's most poignant or awe-inducing film, but as a rollicking good time, the film greatly succeeds at what it sets out to do. Even as a kid, I always found Dinosaur to be an uninteresting slot, with some pretty ugly animation too. Now that I'm an adult, the animation does look good at times, but just at times. For the most part, the colors and character designs are so unappealing and non-expressive, I can barely tell the characters apart at times. Not just from each other, but from their backgrounds. The story is almost nothing. It begins with a dinosaur named Aladar being adopted by lemurs, but that part plays virtually zero part in the rest of the film. When the meteor hits and Aladar and his lemur family are forced to walk with other dinosaurs, it's not like he's much of a fish out of water or anything. He gets along fine with the other dinosaurs, and the movie becomes just a lot of walking across lifeless, colorless landscapes. This feels like a film where they thought of the visuals and animation first, universe, and the story just ended up being a side thought. It is cool how most of the backgrounds were filmed on location, but aside from that, Dinosaur is just a chore to sit through, whereas The Emperor's New Groove is a joy to watch over and over again. Looks like you're the fast winner here, Cusco.
Boom, baby!
So considering how Treasure Planet is Treasure Island but in space, I should start with a preface. I am incredibly unfamiliar with Treasure Island's story. Unless, of course, Muppet Treasure Island was surprisingly accurate to the source material, but I'm gonna assume it wasn't. So I can only judge Treasure Planet as its own thing, and yeah, it's not good. Especially because of this character.
Solitude's fun! Don't get me wrong, for heaven's sakes, after 100 years, you got a little nuts!
Even without Ben though, Treasure Planet still has a largely uninteresting narrative with one-dimensional characters. Especially the protagonist Jim. He's basically just a watered-down Aladdin. You know, the underdog who's a diamond in the rough, yada yada yada. The other characters could be more interesting, but the movie barely spends any time with them. Like how these two go from hating each other to crushing on each other seemingly out of nowhere. Instead, the film chooses to have Jim's relationship with the cook John Silver as its main driving force. And man, this relationship could not be less convincing. Not only is the growth of their friendship shown through montage, one of the most impersonal ways you can show two characters becoming friends, but Jim and Silver seem like they belong in different movies. Jim is too grounded and self-serious, Silver is too cartoonish and exaggerated. You can see this just from their character designs alone, how much these two don't pair up. Not just that, but their quasi-father-son relationship feels forced and manipulative. There's no real nuance to the relationship, despite the movie pretending otherwise. The two like each other simply because the screenplay tells them to, and every sentimental moment comes across as a cold and calculated move from the writers. I mean, come on, this dude betrayed you, tied up your friends, and threatened you for treasure, and you're just gonna let him go in the end despite all the crimes he committed? Now, compare this to the relationships and characters of Lilo and Stitch, all of which are incredibly well written and three-dimensional. Wow, is Lilo and Stitch a tearjerker. Every time I watch it, I find myself tearing up at so many of its scenes. Lilo and Stitch isn't completely a drama, of course, and it's got its fair share of exciting and funny moments.
Talk! I know you can.
Okay.
The alien stuff really is a lot of fun. So much so that I really remember liking the franchise and its many shows and sequels, as they mostly focus on the sci-fi stuff. But when it comes to the first film, the thing that really impresses me is its emotional core. There's this really resonant story about friendship, family, and the search for belonging. Lilo and Stitch are just two lonely souls in need of a friend. Lilo and Annie are just two sisters who find themselves in a tragic situation. It's all heartbreaking stuff, and the movie really makes you sympathize with all these characters. But the film still manages to be hopeful and uplifting, the cinematic equivalent of a warm hug. It's easily one of Disney's best post-Renaissance films. Not that that era is necessarily filled with fantastic films. And, as such, is an easy pick over Treasure Planet. Considering Pixar's dual release back in 2015 and how Inside Out was so much better than A Good Dinosaur, I found myself wondering in 2016 whether the same would be true for the year's Disney films. If one would be great and the other would just be meh. Luckily for Disneyers everywhere, Zootopia and Moana were both excellent titles. And no doubt tons of people are gonna disagree with my pick, whichever one it is. So while I love Moana, no, really, I love Moana, Zootopia would be my pick for 2016. Moana is a great movie, one that's got some catchy tunes and a genuinely poignant coming-of-age story. Moana's journey of self-discovery is an exciting and resonant one. However, the film has some serious pacing problems, especially during the first act. A lot of it feels like simply going through the motions, and I actually don't think the film starts being great until Moana finally leaves her island. And while I would love to make the claim that it's smooth sailing from that point onward, that isn't exactly true.
Just pick an eye, babe. I can't concentrate on what I'm saying if you keep... Yeah, pick one. Pick one!
Okay, so the Tamatoa scene is the only real problem I have with the second half of Moana. I find him such an annoying character, and all the humor in the scene falls completely flat for me. Every time he shows up, he puts the film to a halt, and its momentum doesn't come back until they leave him. Jesus, he is going to be terrifying in live action. Now, you compare this to Zootopia, a film that's just so much fun from the first second to the last. A few number of jokes go on for a tad too long.
D.
0, 3.
0.
3.
Hey, Flash, want to hear a joke?
No!
But for the most part, Zootopia is a blast. It's fast, clever, witty, and the world building is crazy impressive. The amount of thought and creativity that went into making this world where anthropomorphic animals exist is insane. I would actually love to play a Zootopia open world game, just exploring the rich world Disney made for this film. Now, Zootopia is a lot of things. things. A neo-noir mystery, a buddy comedy, an action film, a social commentary on modern-day society, and while lesser films would probably fumble greatly at trying to combine all of these into one coherent package, Zootopia succeeds at making every aspect of its screenplay captivating. I found myself laughing at a lot of its jokes, at the edge of my seat during the more exciting scenes, bobbing my head to try everything, and being greatly affected whenever the film wanted to be a lot more serious. The character I found myself liking the most was the protagonist, Judy Hopps. It's one big positive Moana and Zootopia share in common. They both boast three-dimensional protagonists who are easy to root for. Both are determined and ambitious, but have moments of weakness and confusion. Both are on a journey of recognizing their strengths, but also their flaws. They're just well-written leads. Once you're happy, the movie decided to center around. Yeah, the more I think of it, the harder of a choice this becomes. But as a whole, Zootopia is a stronger film. It was a tough competition, but you win the honeypot, Zootopia.
Well, hallelujah.
I'm a little bummed out this video ends with the year 2021, because every pick I've had so far have been films I consider favorites. I can't say the same for either Raya and the Last Dragon or Encanto, because while I like parts from both films, I don't think either succeed as a whole. Raya especially. Its set pieces are gorgeous and exciting, but its world building is so sketchy and its characters are all weakly written. Raya herself is pretty uninteresting, essentially just being the bland YA fantasy protagonist who's the enabler of plot points. The other characters feel like they belong in a different movie. They're supposed to be living in... what was that, Raya?
A dystopian world. A land that's gone to waste.
Yeah, that. These characters have all lost their families to the Droon, and yet that grief only seems to show up when the movie wants to manipulatively tug at the heartstrings. The world around them is defined by what took their loved ones. So why are they so upbeat and jokey most of the time? As for Namaari, her relationship with Raya is barely developed. It's one of the screenplay's biggest driving forces, and yet the two were friends for less than a day. Her betrayal doesn't sting as much as the movie wants to because, again, they only knew each other for a day before Namaari betrays Raya, making their entire relationship feel so contrived, before and after the betrayal. Which leads to what I think is the worst part of Raya. Its message. This might be the most irresponsible message I've heard from a Disney movie.
Yeah, well, the world's broken. You can't trust anyone.
Or maybe the world's broken because you don't trust anyone. When they put their faith in me, it empowered me beyond anything I could imagine. The same can happen with Namaari.
No, absolutely not. Hey, remember when Namaari betrayed Raya, and then fought with her, and then betrayed her again? Namaari has done absolutely nothing to prove she's worthy of trust. And the idea that Raya is supposed to see the good in her despite her repeatedly showing how selfish she can be is insane to me. Sisu herself is a bewildering character. She sees this awful world around her and herself gets betrayed by someone that she trusted, and yet she still says this?
Or maybe the world's broken because you don't trust anyone.
Sisu, the reason why your siblings trusted you was because they were close with you. There was a friendship between y'all. It was an informed decision. There are some really self-centered people in the world, and showing them that you trust them just because isn't going to change their minds. It's just gonna give them more opportunity to take advantage of you. Luckily, Encanto is the complete opposite in this regard. Its message is really, really great. In a world where it's so easy to define one's worth with things like grades, awards, job titles, social media likes, Encanto has a rather unique and important message of how we're so much more than just our skills and talents, and that it's much more important to be a good person than a great one. So the message is all well and good, but the movie itself is pretty mediocre. It's gorgeously animated, nobody's gonna deny that. But despite its gigantic cast, Encanto feels rather small, uneventful, and low stakes, even if it really shouldn't. Their entire town is supposedly at stake here, and yet I never felt the weight of the situation or the urgency. Encanto just isn't very engrossing or exciting. The entire thing seems to hinge on a hug of all things. And at times, it feels like the screenplay is struggling with how to stretch its story to a feature-length runtime. The whole Bruno subplot especially was extremely shoehorned in. It felt like it was just there to artificially add more stakes and extend the plot. I don't get why an entire town would react so dramatically to Bruno's powers, or why Bruno himself would refuse to do visions anymore. He can see bad things before they happen, ergo, he can prepare people and even try to prevent said bad thing from happening. The whole we don't talk about Bruno thing feels like a gigantic leap in logic. Even if it did produce the film's biggest hit. The movie's still a charming time though, with likable characters and colorful set pieces, and I probably would be a bit more forgiving if not for the ending. The house coming back to life and everyone getting their powers back makes the entire story feel pointless. Where writers choose to end their story is important, and this film really should have ended with the Madrigals learning how to be okay without having any powers. It's lousy for the movie to have its characters learn the lesson and immediately give them back their powers once they do. Still, the soundtrack is fun and the message, for the most part, is important. And because it's not as ambitious as Raya, it actually succeeds more thanks to its simplicity. So for 2021, Encanto was the best Disney animation film. And those are all the dual releases Disney Animation has had so far. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with my picks. I'm probably gonna do a Pixar one soon, so be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.